the government has announced a $51 million recovery plan for international education providers to help cushion the blow dealt by Covid-19. The sector's been crying out for help because it's missing out on the lucrative dollars from international students. Some $20 million will be invested in state and state-integrated schools for the remainder of the year, $10 million for private training establishments and $10 million to develop new products and services. The Education Minister Chris Hipkins joins me now from our Parliament studio. Good evening, Minister. So $50 million, it sounds like a lot of money, but this is a $5 billion industry. So how much difference will that money make?
Look, we've been very clear all along. We cannot save every job in international education, as we cannot save every job in tourism and other sectors that have been affected by COVID-19. This is helping to cushion the blow. It's helping to gear the sector up for a recovery and for a transformation. The international education in the future, I think, is going to look different to the way it's looked pre-COVID-19.
So then if you can't save every job, as you say, what are you hearing about potential closures and job losses?
Look, I think there's no doubt that there are parts of the sector that are going to have to make some difficult adjustments, and we know the private training establishment part of the sector is really struggling, particularly in English language schools and so on. We do want to make sure that we maintain a base level of capability there. Some of those PTEs will go into hibernation. We want to be able to support them to do that so that when we can bring international students back into the country, we can help them to liven up again when we're in the position to do that.
What percentage do you reckon are going to have to go into hibernation?
Look, I wouldn't put a number on that. We know that there'll be some tough adjustments for the sector. We know that it's not going to be, an easy path for them. So we want to be able to support them to do that. But we also want to provide the opportunity for them to take other opportunities that are in front of them. So, for example, English language schools, we're giving them extra funding so that they can work with refugee communities here in New Zealand to provide that English as a second language training that at the moment we're short of. So we are trying to be creative in helping them to get through this very difficult period.
So basically, has COVID shown us that the model for the industry based around international students is fatally flawed?
Not necessarily. I mean, we were bringing in, at a peak, 117,000 international students a year. Now, clearly, when we've got border restrictions in place and we're managing sort of 5,000 to 6,000 people in managed isolation at any given time, the whole way the sector operates is going to have to change because we're not going to be able to bring in the tens of thousands of people that would typically come in at the beginning of an academic year.
But have we become overly reliant on them, Minister? Sorry, have we become overly reliant on those students, though?
I think that to some extent it has prompted a good hard look at what we're doing in international education. I've always maintained the position since I became Minister of Education that we shouldn't see international students as cash cows for our education system. They add a lot to New Zealand. That's not just about the money they bring in and their fee revenue and so on. They also bring in a cultural exchange, an academic exchange and a whole lot of other things that are good for New Zealand. But we don't want to have a large proportion of our providers reliant more or less solely on international education and international students.
So let's look at some of the specifics. 20 million to go to pastoral care. That's going to state and integrated schools. Is that about keeping students here over the summer break so you don't lose even more who might decide to return home?
Now, what we recognise for the school sector in particular, where they're often dealing with pretty tight margins, they don't have a lot of cash sitting in the bank to weather the storm, that they will have some international students still in New Zealand, but they might not have all of the international students that they'd budgeted for. So they're going to be under financial pressure. And in order to make sure they're doing a good job for the international students that are still here, we've got to provide some support, recognising that they're not going to be generating the sort of revenue from international students that they might have otherwise been.
Okay, so this remote learning model, obviously you're putting some more money into that. Will it have the same prestige? Will it have the same attraction? People want to go to a country, have the experience, when they just go to another country who will have them?
Oh, look, I think but that's part of the New Zealand package. So what we're looking at is whether international students can start their studies in their home country, still come to New Zealand when they're able to do so, but actually begin their studies in the meantime. So there's high demand for that. Some providers are already doing that and we're already supporting them to do that.
So will those students have guaranteed access to New Zealand at some point during the course of their study?
Well, look, one of the things that we're working through with the sector is when we're in a position to start bringing international students in, what should be the prioritisation system for that? What should be the priority criteria? We haven't reached any final decisions on that yet. I'm meeting with the international education sector as a whole again tonight via Zoom, and so we're keeping that dialogue open. But that's one of the things we want their feedback on.
So, Minister,
how would we decide?
Understand. So, but do you think it's likely that students who sign up to begin their study overseas remotely will be given preferential treatment when the borders do open?
Look, that's one of the things that could well be part of the criteria, part of the consideration around, who gets prioritised.
Why don't you just think of a way that you can bring international students back now with isolation? Because that is what some in the sector are calling for and some in the business sector. Why is it not possible?
Yeah, look, it's not as black and white as you might think. So if you look at student accommodation, for example, there's often shared facilities there. So they might be sharing bathrooms and kitchens and so on. And that's not the model that we're using for our managed isolation and quarantine at the moment. They've often got multiple entry and exit points from student hostels, and we're trying to, again, make these facilities as secure as possible. You have to have health people in the facilities to do the daily health checks.
But do you see a way where it would be possible, while we're still operating an isolation and quarantine model, where you could bring these students in and put them through 2 weeks?
Look, that may well be possible, and we're working with the sector to make sure that if we're going to go down that road, that it's very, very robust. They will have to meet exactly the same standards, at least as good as standards as our managed isolation facilities that we're currently operating. We do not want to see COVID-19 come across the border, so we're going to be, making sure that any increase in the numbers of people coming across the border is matched with a very, very rigorous isolation regime when they get here.
Time frame for that?
I haven't put a specific time frame on it, other than to say, we'll work as quickly as we can.
Work as quickly as you can will probably not be much comfort to some of these organisations who are, they're teetering on the brink. Can you not give them more?
Oh, look, I do understand it's a very difficult time for the sector. I think there are a lot of sectors at the moment that are hanging out for more people to be able to come across the border. Tourism, there are some essential industries who are crying out for skilled workers to come across the border. So, there's a lot of pressure on government here. We are working as quickly as we can to get good answers to all of those groups of people. There's some tough decisions for government to make, no question about that, and we're working as quickly as we can to do that.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That is the Education Minister Chris Hipkins.